Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
It's my friend is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I hope that you are doing well on this Monday. I actually got some stuff cleaned up and done yesterday, like house cleaning stuff. Need to do a lot more of that, but started to get the office cleaned back up and actually getting my desk under control. So I'm going to try to moving from the desk out from the rest of the house. So at least that was happening with some other things happening yesterday. There is a lot to be done, and I've got an important meeting tonight. Well, I got a meeting this afternoon, then an important meeting tonight. And then I also got to make sure that I read John Truby's work, which I don't know where that book is sitting. I think in the kitchen, because we're looking at the first 2 chapters of John Truby's work on the anatomy of genre tomorrow night on the morning grind. So there is a lot happening over here. So let's see who all is here. Let's see, we got Tomocrat, good morning. And Charlie, good morning. James and Phaser Wrist, welcome. Robert's here, good morning. Let's see. So glad to see everybody. Phaser Wrist says I quit cleaning when I realized it. I'm going to make it dirty again. LOL. Endless cycle, like mowing the lawn. Yes, it is. Yeah, I don't see Sable yet this morning. Yeah, but unfortunately, when you stop cleaning, you just end up with just this gigantic pile of everything around the house, and that's where I got to. So, it's always a fight. It's always a struggle. Let's see. Yeah, come on in to the Ravenkeep Discord. Come and join what's going on. We've got it set up nice in there now. Good morning, Jappards. Good morning. So let's see. I guess that's the big thing. So tomorrow night, table talk, discussion of John Truby's The Anatomy of Genre with Doug and Brianna. Please do follow that channel as well. All right, let's go ahead and let's get straight into our morning rituals then. I've been lax on those the last couple of days, but I'm feeling like, all right, I'm still tired. I've still got this weird sleep schedule that I'm doing here. But everybody, got your favorite beverage this morning? Get your favorite beverage ready. And then let's take 2 deep breaths, complete inhales, complete exhales, and then we will take a look at The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, what our next chapter in that is. So here we go. Deep breaths. Here we go. Excuse me. Breathe, breathe, sneeze, and sip. There we go. So now we've got The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. The definition of a hack. I learned this from Robert McKee. A hack, he says, is a writer who second guesses his audience. When the hack sits down to work, he doesn't ask himself what's in his own heart. He asks what the market is looking for. The hack condescends to his audience. He thinks he's superior to them. The truth is he's scared to death of them, or more accurately, scared of being authentic in front of them. Scared of writing what he really feels or believes, what he himself thinks is interesting. He's afraid it won't sell, so he tries to anticipate what the market, a telling word, wants, and gives it to them. In other words, the hack writes hierarchically. He writes what he imagines will play well in the eyes of others. He does not ask himself, what do I myself want to write? What do I think is important? Instead, he asks, what's hot? What can I make a deal for? The hack is like the politician who consults the polls before he takes a position. He's a demagogue. He panders. It can pay off being a hack. Given the depraved state of American culture, a slick dude can make millions being a hack. But even if you succeed, you lose because you've sold out your muse, and your muse is you and the best part of yourself, where your finest and only true work comes from. I was starving as a screenwriter when the idea for The Legend of Bagger Vance came to me. It came to me as a book, not a movie. I met with my agent to give him the bad news. We both knew that first novels take forever and sell for nothing. Worse, a novel about golf. Even if we could find a publisher, it's a straight shot to the remainder bin. But the muse had me. I had to do it. To my amazement, the book succeeded critically and commercially better than anything I've ever done. And others since have been lucky too. Why? My best guess is this. I trusted what I wanted, not what I thought would work. I did what I myself thought was interesting and left its reception to the gods. The artist can't do his work hierarchically. He has to work territorially. Well, that's interesting. That's an inspirational thought for today. Good morning, Brent. Let me take this down and pull up our screen sharing so we can take a look at continue to take a look at the ORC today. I did watch yesterday as well. While I was doing some cleaning, I turned on Roll of Laws videos on the ORC and what his problem was. And I understand better now. I'd watched one of them, but then watching them in order and going was enlightening and trying to understand what he thought the problem was. And actually, there are a couple of things I want to verify with regard to other things. But let's go ahead and bring up... I do also actually want to look at a comment I put out yesterday. Okay, make sure this is the correct video. Well, nope, not. Because this Josiah, what? You would think it'd be easier just to get to a comment, to a video with your comment on it. Okay, found it. Okay. So first of all, well, I guess with we could start with a little bit of the OpenAI stuff. I was reading that this morning. I mean, that's kind of finished. So it looks like Sam Altman was not hired back on. He is going to Microsoft with Greg Brockman to start a new venture there. So their negotiations fell through. And it seems like a lot of OpenAI will go with them. So it seems like they destroyed OpenAI, which was one of the most fun things going on. And it appears they destroyed it. Hey, BGD. Okay, so here is what Josiah Firesnake said yesterday regarding the ORC license and what was going on with the Infinite license. Firesnake says, it's not that complicated. Do you want to use Paizo's IP? You have to use Infinite. The ORC has nothing to do with you. Forget about the ORC. Do you want to use the new Pathfinder rules without using their IP? Use the ORC. Forget about Infinite. It has nothing to do with you. It's not one or the other. It's not hard to understand. Which is what we came to, right? But after, but this was my comment then. So this appears to be where we stand with this. So the question is, and see if I'm right about this. If I'm not, I mean, let me know in the comments here in the chat to see if I'm misunderstanding what's going on. So yes, that does seem to be the case. We got two different things. We got the Infinite over here, the Infinite, and then we've got everything else that can be published. And it's setting up so that the two cannot meet at all. You use the Infinite license if you want to publish anything with the world. I'm talking about the IP here. That it's not product identity, but it would be called product identity under the OGL. But all of the world and lore stuff. If you want to use that, you have to publish under the Infinite license. And if it's on Infinite, then it has to stay on Infinite. And if you're publishing elsewhere without that, you just want to use the mechanics of Pathfinder, then you use ORC. So I said the question is right. The question is why, right? Given that Paizo has been such a proponent of the virtuous circle and share alike, and as Roll of Law points out, that the virtuous circle and the share alike is forced upon you if you are going to use ORC. It's such a philosophical part of this. Given that Paizo has been such a proponent of the virtuous circle and share alike, why not allow people to cross-pollinate game mechanics between material published with the ORC and material on Infinite, especially when they control the Infinite license and were leading the development of the ORC? What problem did they see? Because this seems like the perfect use case for Paizo to demonstrate its brilliance, because it was leading the effort to develop the ORC. So it was going to be done to its own specifications. I realize other people had input, but I mean, it was leading what the ORC was, and it owns the Infinite license. It can do whatever it wants with the Infinite license. So this was a perfect opportunity for Paizo to demonstrate how well these things work. Because the Infinite license 2.0, if that were rewritten, that would just deal with everything that the ORC doesn't cover. The ORC is just about the expression of game mechanics. And then you can have, if you want to license the world, you got to do that through Infinite 2.0 license, which you can accept or reject. You're free to accept or reject. And if you want it to be on, if you want to use that IP, it has to be sold through this exclusive store. what problem did they see that they would not have that happen? Because it seems like it seems like the perfect thing for them to demonstrate exactly how well this all works. I checked the infinite license. So I do want to take a look at the infinite license. But I was like, I wanted to verify that the infinite license does say that if you publish using the infinite license, that you can't publish it anywhere else. And it does. I found this right here. I checked the infinite license and it says, except for short promotional excerpts used to promote your work, you may not display, recreate, publish, distribute, or sell your work or derivatives thereof outside of the program administered on Roll20 websites or through other platforms or channels authorized or offered by the publisher. So am I right in this? Therefore, if you write a book for the Galorian world, that's Paizo's world, publish that on Infinite, that also includes a fantastic new addition to the encumbrance system, you cannot ever publish that system elsewhere as ORC or not. It's forever locked within Infinite because ORC requires share alike. Well, this just specifically says that if it's published through the Infinite license, then you're not allowed to distribute even a derivative like a chunk of that work. Correct? It's going to be forever locked within Infinite. Likewise, if you find a third-party ORC material that has a fantastic encumbrance system, let's say somebody else writes a fantastic encumbrance system using the ORC, and you're like, oh, wow, this is fantastic. I'm going to go write some material for Infinite, and I'm going to use this fantastic encumbrance system. It's ORC. It's open. You can't do that because those game mechanics can never appear in anything anyone writes for Infinite. So if there's something out there that's good ORC material, you cannot bring it into Infinite. Again, am I right in that? Because ORC requires share alike. ORC requires share alike. And Infinite forbids you from doing that. Infinite is completely locked down. So you can't, if you use some ORC material in your work, then you have to use the ORC license, and all of your expressions of mechanics also become open. It's share alike, which is in direct opposition to what Infinite is. So these two things can never meet. These things can never meet. If it's ORC, it stays ORC and can never come into Infinite. If you publish it as Infinite, it can never leave and become ORC. Those things are locked away. I said, am I wrong in this understanding? And I might be, which is what I'm asking right here. Because if I'm not, although it does say on that that thing we read from Paizo the other day, it was saying that you can't do both because one license requires you to make everything open and have it be free, and the other one requires you to lock it down, and you can't serve both masters. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was one of the reasons that Paizo gave. Now, Paizo could change that because Paizo owns the Infinite license. But I said, am I wrong in that understanding? Because if I'm not, that does sound like a strange position for a company to take when it has gone to great lengths to ensure a share-alike provision in the ORC, which does seem to be its most controversial provision, and seems to be backing away from that. Instead of using everything to its maximum effect, it's doing this, which does at least look weird, although it does seem like this is correct, that they're just two completely separate things. Never the two shall meet. That seems to be the case. Let's go to the comments here and see what people, because I could be wrong. I could be wrong. We're still going through this, but that seems to be my understanding. Let's see. Robert says, to me, in that context, the OGL still makes more sense to use as a third party. If you're afraid it would get deauthorized and somehow it would stick in court, that deauthorization, I guess, then there'd be no more open game content. Meaning the third party lost no IP. Now, it might preclude future sales of past books, so I guess there's that, which was one of my concerns. Like, what is the status of things that are licensed under that license if something weird happens to that license? but Wizards already admitted they couldn't block publication of old OGL books, which would absolutely be used against them in court if Wizard tried to claim infringement. All right. So that's my understanding. ORC. Okay. Here's one thing I want to check. I want to check what Ryan Dancy was saying about what license they used. Okay, I can't find this immediately. It must be someplace on Twitter. But it seemed to me that Ryan Dancy thought, I seem to remember this, again, catch me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember that Ryan Dancy thought that they used the wrong license by making it the CC BY and not the CC share alike, they being Wizards. That Wizards released the OGL, released the SRD, the 5e SRD, under the under the CC BY Creative Commons license and not the CC share alike license, was not making that viral. And he said that was wrong. I believe that he wanted it to be viral, but the OGL, now I'm confused on the status of the OGL, because I was also looking on Reddit, and I was saying, I was seeing that some people were trying to declare that new rules present in books were product identity. So now I'm confused. Twincast says, at the end of the day, we're back to game mechanics not being copyrightable. OGL and ORC are just contrivances to copy the exact wording, which is really important. And when we say just conveniences to copy the exact wording, that's far from nothing. And actually, come to think of it, over here, another reason to bring this up. If you want to recall Table Talk Bob, I re-aired my conversation with Bob Tarantino, who wrote his dissertation on the OGL. Now, remember, I interviewed him when the OGL debacle was going on. This was a fantastic conversation. It was part of the Table Talk line, and it just came over to, or I just re-aired it, so it's up now as a permanent home on the Table Talk channel right now. So if you want to conversation with Bob Tarantino, realize what the issues were. He's an entertainment law attorney, and he wrote his dissertation on open licenses, specifically the OGL. That did re-air. And I highly recommend, if you didn't see it and you're interested in the subject, it was a fantastic one. So, okay, Robert verifies here that that's right. Robert Dancy said CC was a major downgrade from OGL. Well, right. So he didn't, we had the conversations about why use OGL over CC and all of that. But there is the CC share alike license. Is that it? CC BY SA. You are free. Whoop. And build upon the material for any purpose, even commercially. The licensor cannot revoke these freedoms as long as you follow the licensing terms. But you must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests the licensor endorses you or your use. Share alike. If you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you must distribute the contents under the same license as the original. Okay, which is not what Wizards requires. And I don't remember share alike being a thing with OGL. Now, the idea was that you could, I believe one of the original ideas with this virtuous circle idea was that what if third party, Wizards going to kick this off by providing the SRD. Now, back then it was like the 3.5 SRD, or it was the 3 SRD. So there was Wizards going to kick this off by putting out the Dungeons and Dragons license or Dungeons and Dragons rules under the OGL. And then if other people improve on those rules, then it could end up coming back to Dungeons and Dragons. If somebody's really innovative in an area and it's open game content, then Wizards of the Coast could come back in and improve Dungeons and Dragons based on that. Now, that would be a circle. That would be the idea of a circle. It hasn't really worked like that, I don't think. That it tends to be, here is the canonical SRD, and then other people go forth from there. I don't know in practice how many things have actually come back to the home company. Now, Paizo then made everything with Pathfinder also OGL. But again, I don't know that if anything actually came back, how much. Maybe it did, but how much stuff came back to Paizo and entered Pathfinder as the result of being developed by a third party. That would be a virtuous circle. But I don't even know that it operates like that exactly. The juxtaposition of Infinite against ORC is stark. Infinite protects their copyrighted work, but ORC, in accordance to Mike and others, appears to specifically state that original work under ORC might not be. Yeah, Micah has a great write-up on this in the Discord server, and I won't read it here without Micah being here and saying I can. And I need more concrete assurances than it depends. Jappert says, if game mechanics were copyrightable or patentable, wouldn't that apply to analogous media as well? The Nemesis system from Shadows of Mordor did get patented. I don't know the Nemesis system. The Nemesis system from Shadows of Mordor? Is that a... Okay, so that's a video game? See, the Nemesis, singular Nemesis, are randomly named enemies in Sauron's army. They're generated uniquely with each playthrough of the game. Such Nemesis have their own personality and will rise and fall in their social structure as the game progresses. Yeah, interesting. Well, Bob Tarantino and I talked about that. Or Bob Tarantino brought up the fact that, this idea that game mechanics can't be copyrightable is kind of, when you're talking, originated out of something like chess or checkers, but that it's not completely clear. And so we've been operating with that, even with something as complex as the rules of a tabletop RPG, but that we don't really necessarily even want that tested in court, because it's perfectly possible that a court could look at this if it came up and went, now, wait a minute. No, you can't copyright something as simple, or you can't copyright the mechanics. You can't protect the mechanics of something as easy as checkers. But once you're getting to something that's hundreds and hundreds of pages of rules, that's a different animal. It's more akin to something like software, and it can be. So it's never been tested in court. Twincast says it matters when most of your games copies a specific another one. For instance, it matters for when most of your game copies a specific other one, not, for example, an encumbrance system. James says that Tarantino conversation is excellent and extremely relevant to this conversation. Oh, Stray gifted a membership. Thank you. Who got the membership? George. George, you just got a membership. Congratulations, George. And thank you, Stray. Twincast says patents are different from copyright. No RPG mechanic is remotely new enough to get patented. Also, patents expire. All right, so let's go back over to the ORC license. We were just talking about why we did not have why Creative Commons did not work for this. ORC scope, as a reminder, so we tried hard to make the Creative Commons license work, but we ran into two unresolvable problems. They wanted to use CC BY SA4. That's the share-alike license. But unfortunately, the share-alike provision requires the downstream community to share the entire work without the ability to designate any reserved material retained by the original publisher. So that was the problem. Wizards of the Coast released some of their content under CC BY, which is not share-alike, which did give everybody the right to use the 5e SRD. Unfortunately, if another publisher builds on that SRD, they are under no obligation to relicense their innovation to the community. This effectively kills the virtuous circle that open source communities are built on. The ORC license intends to ensure that those who innovate off material licensed under the ORC must release their own innovations under the same permissive license that enabled their product in the first place. Okay, I was also thinking about this whole idea of the share alike and virtuous circle, because this is something that Role of Law was talking about that. In order for this to work, and what basically made this work when the OGL was originally created, was that the work of third-party publishers had value. You want to actually be building something of value, making sure that you're giving something of value to the third-party publishers. And if they use ORC, you're ensuring that the expressions of the game mechanics that they may create do not have value because they are copyable. So if you use some material from ORC and you create spells, this was the example Roll for Law created, and you put 10 new spells, well, those spells are now share and share alike. So somebody else can directly copy those spells and could go through everybody's books and make up a list of, hey, 50 new spells for Pathfinder, for ORC, any kind of ORC material. 50 new spells, and they can definitely directly copy all of your spells. And that's perfectly okay because everything has to be share and share alike. So it is saying that the only thing that is going to have value here is that which is the reserved content, which is stuff like your world. ORC license scope. Can I pull my stuff out of the ORC license once I put it in there? Nope. Once you release your content under the ORC license, you have given the world the right to use licensed material for that product forever under the terms and conditions of the ORC license. How long does the ORC last? Forever. The ORC license technically lasts for the life of the copyrights, but when copyright protection expires, you can still use the content because at that point it becomes public domain and everyone can use it without restriction. Can I use ORC license for a board game? Yep, you can use it for any sort of game you can imagine. How are translations treated under the ORC? You are free to translate. Now, this was an issue that Roll for Law had, and said this has been designed for tabletop role-playing games, and that he thought that the further you got away from a tabletop role-playing game, the more this would potentially be a bad fit. Twincast says the ORC is intended to fill the gap between CC BY and CC BY SA. The former prevents a virtuous circle, and the latter doesn't protect actual IP. Virtuous cycle, and the latter doesn't protect actual IP. Correct, yeah. So this is the one that could do both. Which is odd, which does make it odd, since that's exactly what Paizo was trying to do. It makes it odd that it's not a part, not a core part of its entire engine here, because it seems like because it's supposed to do both of those things, it would be perfect to use for Infinite. So why is it not? So people are going to have questions about that. Well, why is that not? If this is so great, if this does exactly what we were trying to do, then why aren't you using it? Are translations treated under the ORC? How are translations treated under the ORC? You are free to translate licensed material under the ORC into another language. As a publisher creating a translated work from an ORC licensed material, you would use an ORC notice in your derivative work. The ORC notice in your derivative work must attribute the original author as well as the translation itself to their legal owners. And both attributions must be included in the ORC notice of downstream publishers who publish products using that translation. Does the ORC license require the use of a system reference document? While some publishers will likely release SRDs under the ORC license to make the delineation between licensed material and reserved material absolutely clear, the license itself does not require the use of a system reference document. The ORC license uses a definition system that defines what is licensed material and what is unlicensed proprietary reserved material, and lifts that administrative burden from the publishers. We believe these definitions are sufficiently robust to allow game designers, publishers, and lawyers acting in good faith to come to a common understanding about what is licensed without the administrative friction and potential for failure of coming up with an SRD for each product. I primarily produce game content of a mechanical nature, spells, magic items, etc., with very little content that would be considered reserved material. With so little to hold back as mine, it feels like my publishing strategy gets fewer protections under the ORC than others who have a high percentage of non-mechanical material they can hold back for themselves. Is there a way I can designate more of my mechanical content as reserved material? No. While creating this type, that would be definitely seems like in violation of the spirit of anything that's going on here. And in fact, oh, there's Micah. Hey, Micah, can we, you wrote a extensive write-up in the Discord server. So rather than having you try to write it here where character comments are a thing in the comments, can I read what your concerns were with the ORC that you had brought up, that you had posted longer? Oh, Micah says, and here is one of the major things Role of Law saw as an issue. So, no, while creating this type of mechanical content may involve just as much effort as creating reserved material, copyright protection is not based on sweat of the brow. All users of the ORC license agree to contribute all of their mechanical content to downstream users. If that contribution does not fit your publishing strategy, or you feel doing so is too generous, it is likely that the ORC license is not the best option for your product. Oh, Micah says absolutely. Okay, so let me bring up what Micah had written here. This is in the Discord server. Oh, there's actually more than I thought here. Okay, Heath brings up in the live stream video how Paizo had put out a declaration of open gaming content of expressions of their rules, but the OGL already explicitly excluded specific things unless a creator were to declare them. Now, if the declaration was exactly as Heath phrased it, one might say that their declaration put forth all of the content related to those mechanics and the creative expressions as written that Paizo allowed and be fine. But if someone were to claim that something was mechanical within a bit of lore text outside of the actual clear-cut, separated out mechanics, technically what they would have been taken would be permitted within the phrasing of the declaration, which is sort of one of the same issues the ORC license creates, except it infects all downstream with the same issues. Now, on the other hand, Paizo did not put forth all of their content as open game content, but they do allow a huge chunk, and allowing referencing of more than what they allow for specific expression, which is more than many other companies. But that is still very different from Paizo fully trusting the virtuous circle and putting out everything mechanical for people to adapt. Their core rules and the like, yes, but not everything. Because not everything specifically used the 3.5 SRD, especially with 2.E. Wait a minute, I think this is the section that I was looking for. Because it's not like anybody has to use it. And that was our issue with WotC originally, or one of the issues, right? That seemed to be something that people in different media outlets were saying that the community wanted, that we absolutely did not. That we were like trying to force Wizards of the Coast to make sure the next edition of D&D was open or something like that, which was not it at all. Because Wizards of the Coast clearly did not have to use the OGL on a new edition. So it's not like Paizo has to either. But it seems odd that when they've set this up to do exactly the situation that they're in, that for some reason they're not. More or less, the Axe portion read sounds valuable for what it is, if not for the ambiguities it is. That is, if you absolutely want to force someone to share what you've shared. However, it treats anything lore-related as being more valuable and protectable, while expressions are not. Sure, well, right. Yes, that is. I mean, that's been the whole thing all along. Whereas the elf is going to give you the option of making your mechanics shareable. It's not forcing you to do so. Sure, someone can take the same idea and rephrase it, but that takes a lot more work to not violate copyright of the work as a whole by copying too much. As Role of Law and others have brought up, the ORC license would allow someone to copy 50 words that have a monster stat block, put that forth as the exact mechanical text, and release it without compensation, because the ORC license allows for that. And if you use the ORC license, you cannot separate anything mechanical at all, unlike the OGL having explicit exceptions, unless you expressed your decision to open up more than that. Some did open up more, which was their choice, but others built businesses off of knowing how to create balanced monsters, items, subclasses, etc., and make them thematically tied together in a nice package. The ORC license doesn't work for those businesses. That's what I was just talking about a moment ago when I was saying that the OGL appears, as far as my understanding, to make sure that the value of the third party contributions actually have monetary value. The mechanical contributions of the third-party companies actually had mechanical value, which is what allowed businesses to thrive and for a lot of material to be created. It absolutely does if you don't put a lot of time in those parts and instead focus on adventure text primarily. So it does have a market, but considering that Role of Law's ELF license allows someone to specifically declare that they declare what they want opened up and only forces that exact material to remain open, not virally infecting future work downstream, it's better for those who want to give and allow people to choose what they want to give back in return. Whereas Paizo is deliberately, with the ORC, wanting everybody to make sure that everything that is ever created under an ORC is open. By not forcing, it can potentially get a larger community and market usage. I agree. Aside from those fanatical about opening up everything, including some who wanted to force lore stuff open as well. So that I can totally understand that also being something that was discussed. Like, well, should we even be protecting lore and worlds? Shouldn't that be open too? I can see definitely some people thinking that. And those who don't want to give without forcing others to open up already have alternatives like CC BY 4.0 and the ORC license. In my particular case, I don't currently have anything that's copying an expression from any other game system. I have endeavored to research and study concepts over even directly copying the idea of a mechanic, except where A, it's too widespread to practically be difficult to trace who used it first, such as maximum die rolls having additional effects, like doubling damage or doubling the die for damage or exploding the rolls as many times as it explodes, etc. Or B, a specific concept was used differently from existing systems, and that concept was already used by many, even if not as widespread as in the other category. Okay, but so the other part was the most important part there. Thank you for posting all this, Micah. If you want to talk about that, it is in the Discord server under the morning grind, so you can definitely do this. Twincast says, Infinite exists essentially for content guidelines. It's odd that they haven't updated it to work well with the ORC, but I doubt it will be that big of a conflict in practice. Micah says, right, no one has to use the ORC license, not even Paizo. But a lot of people at the time of the OGL debacle were wanting it as the ideal license that everyone should be using or not be considered open gaming. Right. Twincast says, it's nice to have the elf as an alternative, but the sky is falling attitude over the idealistic virality of the ORC has been ridiculous from the start. That's not what we have here, right? On this stream. We're just trying to understand, right? Because it seems to do, I mean, the ORC seems to do what they wanted it to do, right? Micah says, certainly, Heath. Figured it was important for context and comprehension, synopsis, and simplification of all the months of discussion on the development of Discord of the ORC license. Yes, it absolutely was. Because I was on it. I mean, I guess I still am on the Discord, but I didn't follow the development of the ORC all the way through. I know we looked at an early version of it, but that was it. And then I kind of fell off my radar. I have created an entire book of spells and want to include the work with a spell from another product under the ORC license. I have created an entire book of spells and want to include within the work a spell from another product under an ORC license. Does this require that all of the other rule mechanics in my spell book are automatically available for downstream users to reference and use in their products? Yes. Using the ORC license within a work means licensing the relevant portions of the entire work. So that just means do not put that spell in there. If you create a book of 50 spells, or if you create a book of 49 spells, or you create a book of 50 spells, 49 of them are completely original to you, and one of them is available under the ORC license, that means that all of your spells just became available under the ORC license. James says, I'd like to get more familiar with the elf license. We're going to take a look at the elf license here in another couple of days or something like that. What is the base SRD in which it's built? The OGL SRD? No, there's no SRD. It's just a license. It's just a license like the ORC is. Well, and the OGL. The OGL can be used with any SRD. The OGL can be used with any SRD. It was just that Wizards of the Coast attached the OGL to the Dungeons and Dragons SRD, which made it valuable. Likewise, there's no SRD attached to the ORC. It could be attached to any SRD. It can be attached to any work. It's just that Paizo attached it to Pathfinder, created the license, and then attached it to Pathfinder that instantly made it valuable. So there's no SRD with the elf anyway either. You can attach it to anything that you want. No, not here, but it's what made him make the elf. Well, for the most part, the ORC license does what was intended, though its explanation lacks nuances on how many ambiguities that has made it flawed. Right, okay, so that was just what I was just saying. I wish to submit an article that includes game mechanics, monster spells, etc. from my ORC license to a game magazine or website with several different articles on a variety of game systems. If I use any ORC content in a work means licensing the relevant portions of the entire work, does the inclusion of my article in the magazine or website mean that all the mechanical material by other contributors, who may not even be aware of my contribution, is now open under the terms of the ORC license? The definitions of work and derivative work anticipate products that are built on one exclusive system or certain types of aggregate works. If a product has distinct sections relating to a variety of game systems, only the portion of the product related to the system you licensed under the ORC license would be required to be licensed back out as an adapted work under the ORC license. Given that, I don't remember having all of these FAQs the last time I went through it. Otherwise, I think the share-alike issues would have come up more here. Given that, can I include the game mechanics for multiple game systems within my product, isolating ORC license-derived game rules in an appendix, so that only that material will be required to be licensed back out? Yes. Where is the precise line between licensed material and reserved material within, say, the context of a spell description? I understand that the spell's range and area and numerical effects would all be considered licensed material, but what about the descriptive text within the spell, such as the manifestation of a baleful howl as a secondary effect, or flavor about how the spell has the physical appearance of a beam of a sickly green light? The license clarifies that reserved material is that which is not essential to or can be varied without altering the game. So the baleful nature of the howl or the color of the light affects the gameplay. So if the baleful nature of the howl or the color of the light affects gameplay, then it is licensed material. I think this is one of the things that Roll of Law said was going to get sticky. It's the intention of the ORC that licensed material is a broad definition that includes descriptive languages supporting the mechanical nuts and bolts of game content, to include the above-mentioned baleful howl and beam of sickly green light. The exception here comes in the form of reserved material, such as including the name of a famous wizard, Bimbol's bursting bunion, or the details that a certain spell was originally developed by the fell brethren of Bonnie Bumbleston, etc. That is also not one of the things that because so if it affects gameplay, if it could affect gameplay, I mean, in a tabletop RPG, the fact that there was a baleful howl with your spell could affect gameplay, or it could be something that is completely irrelevant, or likewise with the color of the light. Like at certain tables, that might affect gameplay, and other cases it might not. So it's something that could potentially affect gameplay. The orc license automates a lot, but you can be more open if you declare it. The elf license requires you to state what you are opening, and what isn't declared isn't opened. And that's what Roll for Combat or Roll of Law was saying, that if you're trying to force somebody to do something they might not want to do, that's where litigation comes in. So he was saying that it's better if the only thing that's open is what you specifically declare is open, instead of doing it the other way. The earlier acts was far more simple, and people asked questions and stated what should be in it. Yeah, so okay, so this is new material here for the grind. Robert says, but wasn't it intended to somehow preserve all of the old open game content so that it could keep being used? I feel like ORC was billed as a stopgap in the event of deauthorization or revocation of the OGL. Bob and I talked about exactly that subject. Bob and I talked about on that stream, I asked Bob if you could take material that was authorized under the OGL, or material that was licensed under the OGL, and immediately relicense it under the ORC. And he said that he thought you could, as long as the OGL license stayed with it, as long as it was an and. Okay, this is now licensed under OGL and under ORC, this material. So listen to the whole conversation on that. Look up my Bob Tarantino discussion that is now permanently hosted. It's found its permanent home on the new Table Talk channel. We talked about exactly that. He tended to say yes, but it seems like Paizo is now saying no, that cannot happen. Micah says this particular entry and the next one are both part of the ambiguity issue with the ORC license and the axe, especially as some of this is axe intended, but not in the license itself. I mean, that does sound not exactly clear. Robert says, I'll admit the clean break from the OGL is not at all what I was expecting. Yeah, it was. So Micah says, no, it was intended. It was to provide an alternative license in case the OGL disappeared. That's what I thought too. That would not have helped us with the status of any existing works under the license. It would not be able to take something from the OGL and put it in the ORC license, as you can't do that under law. You can't take something from one license and put it into the other without the owner approving the new license, which WotC wouldn't be forced to do. Micah says they chose to put it into CC BY 4.0, but they didn't have to. Now the ORC license is out, but they didn't have to put it into that as well, for example. Twincast says, at worst, the ORC encourages good rules writing that doesn't go on prosaic tangents in the middle of a mechanical descriptions instead of before or after. Micah says, right, you can dual license, but you can't take the material and put it into a new license that someone can use alone. Paizo is saying you can't dual license the OGL, which is their issue, regardless of what the ORC license says. I can't believe we've ended up in this position. After going through everything that we did with the OGL debacle earlier this year, and having Paizo supposedly come and save us. I can't believe we're continuing to have these, having to have these licensing discussions. I'm hopeful about this elf. I'm hopeful about this elf. Does the ORC license allow me to copy descriptive text of mechanical game elements verbatim from upstream products? For example, if I'm using a spell, can I reproduce the text of that spell exactly in my product? What about a full monster description? How do I know to correctly draw the line between where licensed material like this starts and stops? You are licensed to use the licensed material verbatim, but are not obligated to do so. Well, obviously, the question above here is about what is licensed material. Where the description of a monster contains creative descriptions that are not required for operation of that monster, then you are not licensed to include those descriptions. Those descriptions that add rich, colorful imagery are probably not reasonably necessary to convey functional attributes of the game system and are outside the scope of what you are licensed to use. The challenging issue at the heart of this license is defining when text has sufficient creative expression to be protected reserved material, and when language presents a substantially utilitarian articulation or a functional description that is unprotected licensed material. This is the drafter's intention that the beam of sickly green light example above exemplifies de minimis creativity and thus lacks sufficiently rich creativity and expression to function as reserved material. Well, Lord have mercy. Oh, sorry. I guess I could have increased that. I thought I had increased it all the way and it wasn't letting me more, but I guess I did. Okay. Yeah, I know I had never read this before. Because that seems like it's a problem. Because there's no way that everybody's going to interpret that in the same way. That sickly green light is something that impacts gameplay. I would say it's something that could possibly impact gameplay, but it doesn't also exemplify enough creativity to be reserved material. And some creative descriptions that are not required for the operation of the monster, then you are not licensed to include those descriptions. Yikes. Micah says, I can believe it. Paizo is a big business, even if still not as big as WotC. They want to control their ecosystems in a way that benefits them. Well, no, I get that. No, I get that. But it seems like if you're Paizo and you have complete control of your infinite license and you are dedicating all of this internal effort and moreover goodwill to the entire RPG community, which you got a lot of during the OGL debacle, about exactly what and providing exactly what the community is wanting. You have complete control over that. Why would you do a job that is less than ideal? Let me put it this way. It just seems like, especially when you've got all of the input of everybody on the Discord server and everybody like that, why would you end up with something that is this, that has these ambiguities? It feels like the orc license and the elf license are appropriately named based on the species of fantasy characters and how the licenses behave. One is elegant and the other makes you hold your nose. Well, Roll of Law specifically said that the elf is not a abbreviation for anything. It's not an acronym. Orc is. So elf is named just because elves are in opposition to orcs in fantasy worlds, most fantasy worlds. So it's kind of a joke name. The license is serious, but he said it was kind of a joke name based on the opposition to orc. Yeah, Micah says, now compare this entry to the previous one in terms of what you're allowed to use from a description. Is it mechanical in nature, yes or no? Well, the entry then asks, is it sufficiently creative? Right, yeah, exactly. This was that. So if this is brought up, if the reason this is here is because this was brought up on the Discord server, then it means Paizo knew about this issue. And why would Paizo not want to clarify this? If it's going to use the ORC on its own stuff, and it's going to have to deal with exactly this problem because it has the infinite, why would you not get more serious about this? Not creative enough is virtually unqualifiable. Right. Yeah. Well, you're going to have to build some legal case around what happens to be sufficiently creative for something. I don't get it. Micah says a major problem, exactly, interpretation issues, and the license itself doesn't answer it. The Axe only creates further confusion. They got a lot of goodwill, and it was a great boon after their previous issues with pay for artists and other things before the OGL debacle, landing at the right time to distract people. Yes, he did say that too. Well, also, and because Roll of Law has been called an elf because of his long hair. Twin Cast says, we want to have ownership over sickly green light now. The ORC keeps out names in specific societies. What else could one rationally ask for? Well, so I would say, so I mean, it seems like I would have gone one way or the other. It seems like trying to say that the reason the sickly green light is okay is because we have because it exemplifies de minimis creativity and it lacks sufficiently rich creativity and expression to function as reserved material. It sounds like it needed to go one way or another. Like I said, and it seems like especially in a role-playing game, if I write if I write stuff about the smell of the monster, and its habitat and its ecosystem, does that inside the context of a role-playing game, does that convey functional attributes of the game system? No, wait, no. Where I was looking at here, the operation of monster, where the description of a monster contains creative descriptions that are not required for the operation of that monster, you are not licensed to include those descriptions. So if I talk about the smell of the monster, is that required for the operation of the monster? Okay, well, I guess that's not required. Is that required for the operation of the monster? It may be used in the operation of the monster, but its smell and its habitat and when it's active and what regions and what time of day, is that required for the operation of the monster? No. Then you are not licensed to use those descriptions. Is the fact that it is baleful, the spell makes a baleful howl as the sickly green light goes forward. That is part of the broad definition that includes descriptive language supporting the mechanical nuts and bolts of the game content. But my description of the smell of the monster and its habitats are not descriptive language supporting the mechanical nuts and bolts of game content. Ugh. Micah says the reason Paizo didn't want to clarify is that because despite the ORC license not requiring an SRD, they knew they absolutely would be able to and cut out anything they didn't want passed on due to ambiguity. Right? It doesn't require an SRD, but after reading this, it really sounds like you would want one. It really sounds like you would want one. And just put here is the material. And so it's going to be viral. It's going to be share alike. Here is my Heath's RPG SRD. Everything in here is ORC. Therefore, I know I'm opting in because I wrote it into this document. And then applied that, and then everything else is not. Now, see, that works. Check my understanding here again. if I own something, I don't have to license it to myself. So if I were to create Heath's new RPG, and I wanted to potentially use the ORC license, but I'm getting fouled up on what exactly, I want to protect my world stuff and just put out the mechanics. But I'm confused about all of this. I'm confused about exactly where it lies. The easiest thing to do is to create an SRD. Which is what it's trying to get you to not have to do. But it seems like, in order to be completely clear, that's what you want to do. Now, that SRD goes out with the ORC attached. If anybody else wants to use that, then it becomes viral and share alike, and they got to adhere to all of the stuff about the ORC. Got it. Now, I go and make a core rule book for my RPG. I own all those mechanics, so I don't have to license that to myself. So when I put out my whole core book that's got my world and my lore and all of the rules in it, I don't have to make that ORC content because I own all of that content. I as a separate document. So it's like if I am the font of those mechanics and it's my ownership right here, I can put out two separate documents. One that is only mechanics, licensed under ORC and SRD, and then another book that is a core book that also includes all of my lore and world building stuff that is no license in it at all. That's just copyright me, right? So then if somebody wanted to make a compatible product with my core book, they would have to license the SRD material and deal with all of the ORC stuff. But I feel I can continue to publish books that do not contain any license with my own stuff. Would be my understanding. Good morning, PH. Good morning. Right. Clarity is more important than what was decided. I called for it on after all three drafts. Equander, Eric Mona recognized that what was brought up, but Arizona law or Paizo ignored. Does the smell confer a negative status effect? Required. Or could it potentially confer a negative status effect? Micah says, as it is, someone could try to sue for taking a line that it isn't required, while someone else could try to justify that it might be mechanical. Exactly, James Bacon. But that ties to, does the system in context call it mechanical, which is what I specifically wanted as part of the definition of the ORC license, which is not. Confer is the wrong word, but it was shortened to the point. Yeah, we talked about that briefly at the start of this stream as well, just very briefly. They called him back, apparently no deal could be reached, and so they went to Microsoft. Yes, Heath, you would want an SRD if you're an upstream licenser, but no one downstream has those rights. Yeah, you can't. That's the sticky issue right there. Hey, good morning, Andrew. I feel like, well, let me see what the rest of the comments are here. Micah says, hey, Heath, yes, Heath, you would want an SRD if you're an upstream licenser, but no one downstream gets those rights. Absolutely. You can separate all you want as the top licenser with an SRD with dry mechanical text. A single person downstream risks their entire document over any ambiguity that might imply. The exact situation you're describing is why every third-party publisher has to create their own version of the artificer if they're not on the DM's Guild specifically, because it isn't in the 5e SRD. Yeah. So now I understand also what role of law was talking about, with the sense that that he was saying that he thought that Paizo was holding something to itself that it was not allowing other people to have. And I was confused about that initially, because I was like, well, no, the ORC allows you to delineate your reserved content from the licensed material. So if Paizo has its book, this one has the OGL in it, but we're about to get the revised edition. But it's so just pretend like this is it. So if Paizo has its book, it has two options because it's creating everything that is Pathfinder 2nd edition completely on its own now. It will be its property, but it wants to license it. So Pathfinder has the option, therefore, of making this book and not licensing, because this one has all the lore and everything like that in it. And then it has the option of making the SRD. But then as soon as somebody says, hey, now go license Pathfinder 2nd edition with the through the SRD using the ORC, every book that is published using those rules has to have the ORC license in it, which is going to include. So if you said, hey, well, this is fantastic, I've got my world, Dark World. I want to make Pathfinder, I want to use Pathfinder 2nd edition rules in it. The only way you can do that is if your book has the ORC in it and it imports all of the confusion. You don't have the option of making it your own SRD anymore, like the equivalent of that anymore. So I get that. You're passing along all of this ambiguity. You're putting a lot of, it seems like you're passing along a lot of potential ambiguity and problems to people who are not the person who originally created this. Robert says, or if you previously used a license, you can just upgrade your product and make all future editions not in the license. Wait, what is Franz? What is Franz standard? Okay. So what is a sufficiently delineated character? The term sufficiently delineated character is a test under U.S. copyright law that describes when a character has sufficient attributes to rise above substantial similarity to a single specific expression and relates more broadly to a collection of attributes so well defined that even if put into a completely new situation, we would recognize the character as being Tarzan or Superman. By using the expression, we are expressly pulling from that body of case law. Micah says the elf license at least means that you get what someone offers, period. You don't get more. You don't have any. You don't have to offer any more yourself, but you can easily. Yes. Which seems like what I would want to do. Oh, FRAN stands for fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So if you're creating an RPG, you can say, hey, these things are open to you, nothing other than that, and you are free to use it and go forward with it, and you don't have to offer anything more yourself. And what was offered to you has to, like, you could do a pass-through, because what was licensed to you can be licensed to others because it's open. That seems like a way to do it. So how would this work, say, if a stat block that contains a proper noun or trademark? Proper nouns and trademarks are not licensed under the ORC license. While the concept and most contents of a stat block, which contain an aggregation of functional information, is predominantly licensed material, all proper nouns and trademarks would need to be edited out. For example, using the previously referenced spell Bimball's Bursting Bunion, downstream publishers wishing to reproduce the mechanical elements of the spell would be best off simply deleting Bimball's name entirely and listing the spell as Bursting Bunion. Likewise, should the spell's description include non-mechanical descriptions relative to Bimball and his invention of the spell, that material not being required for the operation of the spell would not be considered licensed content. Publishers operating in good faith are encouraged to consider the difficulties faced by downstream publishers who must excise this material from commonly referenced game elements like spells and equipment, and may wish to avoid this type of naming construction to make things easier on downstream publishers. How does one define what is and is not licensed material under the terms of IE2 when adapting material from one game system to another? For example, for most RPGs, a character's name, details of their upbringing, and overall fashion sense would not be considered licensed material because, per IE2, these details can be varied without altering the methods of operation of the game and are non-mechanical descriptive elements concerning a clearly expressed character. However, I'd like to use the ORC license to incorporate this presumed reserved material into my original RPG, Age of Epics, a narrative game in which descriptive elements like hair color, fashion sense, and details of a character's upbringing are critical to the mechanical play of my game. Can I do this? What impact might I have on downstream publishers? Because we can't vary the definitions of reserved material and licensed material in a flexible way, the default would be that a truly narrative-based game system would predominantly be considered reserved material and not available for use. Despite that, you as the publisher of that content could open it up for use as licensed material simply by describing the content as expressly designated licensed material in your ORC notice. Well, that's interesting. I thought they were going to go the opposite direction with that. I thought the answer to that was going to be different. So if you like, well, that's like a fate thing, for instance. If debonair fashion sense is something that's actually mechanical in your game, then I would have said that I thought they were going to say that that would be something that is mechanical to the nature of the game and therefore would be licensed material. Micah says, that's why I'm specifically interested in the Elf license getting the attention that I feel it deserves. It isn't out yet because he wants to make sure it's solid, but it's easy to understand. Not viral, give what you want. I saw the thumbnail for that, but I did not watch. Micah says, the problem, Heath, is that the license itself doesn't match this specific Act's answer, and we haven't even gotten to the license yet. Is a stat block protectable trade dress and therefore protectable reserved content under ORC? The purpose of a stat block is to effectively convey a multitude of functional elements of a character. While in rare cases there may arise protectable trade dress rights on the border design or color combinations accompanying these elements, the contents and descriptions do not constitute trade dress and are licensed material under the ORC license. I just got the license to build an RPG based on the newest Hollywood blockbuster. Can I use the ORC license to publish my RPG without putting my licensor's protected rights at risk? Definitely. The reserved material of third parties remains protected under ORC. So if you have a license to create RPGs for that big bad sports league, movie franchise, or entertainment brand, you can license those RPGs out under the ORC without jeopardizing those third-party assets, unless your license with them prohibits doing so. We have negotiated with most of the big movie studios and sports leagues, and while they often come to the table wanting to own everything, including the game mechanics, we have rarely failed to educate them and eventually get clauses put in their contracts that they acknowledge they do not own the game system, which is the heart of the ORC license. Some third-party reserved material licensors may want you to add something near your ORC notice saying that their IP, to the extent that it doesn't contain ORC licensed material, does not constitute ORC content, which we believe is acceptable. Can I say which primary game my product is built on? Absolutely. The trademark legal doctrine of nominal fair use says that you can say your product is compatible with another product. If you want to say your adventure is compatible with any famous brand, you can always have the right to do so, provided A, you would reasonably need to identify the trademark to communicate which game system you're referring to, B, your use is limited to only that which is reasonably necessary to identify the compatibility, and C, you are not otherwise implying that you are authorized or endorsed by the companies that own the trademarks, which the OGL stopped you from doing. The ORC does not. Several answers in this document refer to mechanics or mechanical, terms that are not explicitly defined in the ORC license itself. What is meant by these terms? In this context, mechanics or mechanical refers to material covered by section IE2, 1 through 4. Can I use CC BY Micah says 1, definition of licensed material means 2, those expressions reasonably necessary to convey functional ideas and methods of operation of a game that are contained in a work that are comprised of systems, procedures, processes, rules, laws, instructions, heuristics, routines, functional elements, commands, structures, principles, methodologies, operations, devices, and concepts of play, and the limitations, restraints, constrictions, allowances, and affordances inherent in gameplay, including but not limited to expressions describing the function of or providing instructions as to the, so this is, according to the license, what licensed material is. Okay, let me just go continue over here for the moment. Can I use CC BY content in my ORC licensed products? It is possible to include CC BY licensed content in an ORC licensed work. The ORC license does not create any restrictions on downstream licensees' use of the CC BY licensed content. The ORC license does not create any restrictions on downstream licensees' use of CC BY licensed content, and the CC BY license does not require a work using CC BY licensed content to be itself licensed under CC BY, such as CCSA and OGL requires. Because the CC BY licensed content is another source designated to receive attribution, that attribution should be included in the ORC attribution notice. You would need to make sure your use of both the CC BY licensed content and the ORC licensed content are in compliance with the requirements of both licenses. But the use of CC BY content without licensing your own work under CC BY can be compatible with the ORC license. If my product is wholly original to my own work and does not use any content from other publishers, can I release it licensed under both ORC and a Creative Commons license? Offering the same work under multiple licenses can be complex with potential conflicts that could arise trying to comply with various licensing requirements, creating significant risk for yourself and other publishers who want to use your content. The clearest option would be to have separate, clearly distinct works or reference documents for each license rather than a single one with multiple licenses applied. If a publisher chooses to release one edition of a work under the CC BY license and a separate version under of the exact same work released under the ORC license, while this may cause enforcement headaches for you, neither license prohibits this. Can I use ORC licensed material in my CC BY product? No. If you are granted the right to use game mechanics under an ORC license, you cannot license that content out under CC BY unless the licensor for whom you license the content and all licensors before them contributing to that system also agree to the transition. Can I use OGL licensed content in my ORC product? The OGL stipulates that open game content may only be used under the terms of the OGL license. So we do not see any way that Wizards of the Coast open game content you got a license to use under the OGL could be licensed out by you under the ORC license unless they published an SRD type document with the ORC notice attached. Despite that, if you published an OGL product, you could strip out any protectable expressions of game mechanics you received under the OGL license and release that new product under ORC. Okay, so the definition of the licensed, this is licensed materials, but not limited to expressions describing the function of any providing instructions as to the following, and then it goes to list anything that would apply to narrative games, and then it goes on to list anything that would apply to narrative games as well. Interesting. Oh, thank you. Yes, we got 20 people watching. Please do hit the like button. So if you hit the like button, other people who might be on YouTube right now and would like to have been in on this conversation or would like to watch on replay will know this is useful information and that you're enjoying it. So it's not just about how many likes, but it's about getting the material out to other people who might be subscribed, like they may be subscribed and sitting here on YouTube right now, and the algorithm just isn't shoving or showing this to them. So they might want to know. So you help get this to other people who might want to know when you hit the like button. So yeah, that's because I really thought they were going the other way. Is it a breach of the ORC license to use a license? We're going to finish this, going slightly long here. I got other things to do, but I'm going to finish this document. We'll have to look at the license exactly another day. Is it a breach of the ORC license to use a licensor's restricted material? Technically, it is not a breach of the ORC license to use a licensor's restricted material, but the ORC license does not grant you any right to use the restricted material. While you do not warrant or represent that you won't use the restricted material under the ORC license, which makes use of that material a breach, the ORC license's silence on restricted material doesn't mean you're free to use it. The ORC license specifically avoids granting rights or addressing remedies with respect to restricted material. It does this so the owner of that intellectual property can seek whatever remedies courts allow. For this reason, the unauthorized use of restricted material does not automatically trigger the license's termination section. Breach only fails if you fail to grant back to the community an ORC license in your adapted licensed material, try to apply different terms to the licensed material on downstream users, or apply effective technological measures to the licensed material that restricts exercise of the licensed rights by others, claim without separate authorization that you were endorsed by a licensor, or fail to include the required ORC notice. Digital applications of the ORC rights. What about digital rights? Digital rights are fully included. Nothing in this license restricts the platform on which the licensed material can be used. In fact, Section 2A specifically gives a license to use the licensed material in all forms and formats, whether now known or hereafter created. Does the ORC license require that I provide the source code written for software that implements or assists in using the licensed material? There's no language in the ORC requiring the licensor to provide anything beyond the work as it is sold to end users. No license is granted under the ORC to specific software code. Only game mechanics and certain expressly designated reserved materials are licensed. So if a licensor programs game mechanics and puts them in an electronic game where the game mechanics are obscured, it's the licensee's job to reverse engineer the game mechanics and use them in a different product. The licensor has no duty to provide this. If you create an electronic game based on licensed material, you are free to do that, but you are obligated to give back to the gaming community only the new game mechanics that you developed and incorporated into your product. We realize that for some large software product distributors, they require you to assign all rights in your code to them. This would be a violation of the ORC, and you are prohibited from granting them those rights. That seems well, like a lot. Because if you're trying to make a video game, I can totally see that there would be a lot of other types of mechanics that would need to be created. And so all of those would be lost if you used ORC material, or all of those would become licensed material. Phew. And that wasn't even the license. That was the ORC Acts, answers and explanations for the ORC license. This over here is the final ORC license. Where is definition E of licensed materials? I just want to check that. We'll look at this tomorrow, but this is specifically, Michael was saying that this is different than what is said over here. The answer in the Acts was different because I thought they were going a different direction. Licensed material means those expressions reasonably necessary to convey functional ideas and methods of operations of a game that are contained in a work that are comprised of systems, processes, blah, 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 not limited to expressions, but not limited to expressions describing the function or providing instructions to the following. Including but not limited to expressions describing the function or providing instructions that follows. Methods of determining failure, success, or outcome. You would have to do that in a narrative game. Methods and mediums by which the players play the game, which would include narrative game stuff. Speaking, messaging, acting, pantomiming, writing notes, asking questions, making statements. Yeah, that sounds like narrative stuff. Yeah, it is a lot. Yeah, and just reading the Acts makes it obvious there are ambiguities. You wouldn't have had to say all that. You wouldn't have to say all that. I mean, I like the idea of having an FAQ with it. But when it was that technical, when it would appear to be that technical and introduce other potentially ambiguous language. Yeah, that wasn't just hey, here's some things general users might ask. Yeah, all of those things apply to narrative games. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And so, so what was it specifically saying over here? The issue was that it was saying a clearly expressed character. Because we can't vary the definition of reserved or licensed material in a flexible way, the default would be that a truly narrative, no true Scotsman right here, a truly narrative-based game system would predominantly be considered reserved material and not available for use. That does seem like that completely contradicts, what I hadn't even gone through the license yet, and I was like, oh no. When I was reading this question, I was like, oh no, the mechanics to a narrative game, that would be licensed material, but they say no, that would be reserved material. Weird. Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. I think. All right. I got things to do today. I got meeting this afternoon, meeting tonight. I got work to be done. There's work to be done. Hopefully you guys have work to do as well. Be creative. Go for it. Thank you so much for being here and contributing to the conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for everybody who has been here and watching. Please do hit the like button. Thank you to everybody who's been in the chat and made the stream even better. You guys always do. We have such a fantastic community here. The chat is such a huge part of this. That's why I like to do this live and not like sit here and go through it myself and record it. So you guys have been amazing. If you're watching on replay, thank you so much for watching on replay. And if I'm getting something wrong still, or you notice something, put it down in the comments. I'll be reading the comments as we go. So have a wonderful day. Go forth, be creative, be constructive, and grind on.